I'm a mess when it comes to painting, but it is just more of a feeling. I might start painting up at the top and then think, ooh, I want to go over here, and then I'll put a dab of paint on the canvas, but then leave that and go somewhere else, and then 5 minutes later come back and blend that dot back in. When I paint florals, they pull me in. I never get bored with them. It fulfills a part of me that, nothing else can. When you're making it come alive. And
we need art, let's make it known.
Hello and welcome to the Mainframes, where we take a dive into the lives of artists and creatives working out of Mainframe Studios. I'm here today with painter Jess Quinn. Jess, it's great to have you here with us today.
Well, thank you for having me.
So let's start out with a little check-in. Tell me what life has looked like for you recently. Things are really different for a lot of us. So have you been having time to paint? Are you able to get into the studio? What's life like?
I decided to bring my studio home during these last couple months, just so I would have time to still do things with my daughter. So we'll take breaks and go do things. And I still paint as well. So usually about 4 to 5 days of the week. I set up my studio in the basement, and so I put lots of light on and put my book on tape, and then I just paint for about 5 hours or so of the day. Throughout the days I do drawing out all the canvases, which take multiple hours as well. So I'll do that upstairs and have more of that natural lighting that I miss from the studio.
Well, why don't you walk us through your artistic journey a little bit? Have you always primarily been a painter? When did you start doing these big, beautiful botanical drawings?
I think it all started, obviously, I went to college for art education. My emphasis in college was painting, although I wasn't quite sure that that's what I wanted in the beginning. I just kind of chose something. So I had a wonderful painting professor at UNI. His name was Fergie, and he really pushed for experimenting and just creating. And so I really enjoyed having him. He really pushed me to just create. And so a lot of my work in the very beginning was extremely abstract. I did a lot of inks and watercolors in college. And then after the college experience was done, I taught high school art for a couple of years in Kansas City. And then I came to the area, the Des Moines area, and taught for an additional 8 years in Southeast Public School District. And I wanted to work on my other passion. When you're really passionate about your job, you don't always have time for other things. And so for me, I didn't really have time to create. I spent a couple of years trying to figure out what I wanted to do. I knew I didn't want to do the same things I did in college. I was a different person, but I really didn't know what it was I was interested in. I found that I enjoyed painting landscapes and florals. I had my first show at the Ankeny Art Center, and the director there, Barb Baskey, said, well, choose one or the other. And so I think that was a really big turning point for me, like to show work. She said you can paint, whatever you want, but for when you show, kind of have a cohesive body of work. And when I paint florals, they pull me in. I never get bored with them. The movement, the blending, with landscapes, they're sometimes quick, they're not as detailed, and I'm done and I'm on to the next. I don't have the same kind of passion with landscapes as I do with my florals. And so my first big floral, really the 4 foot by 5 foot ones, was, I'd say, my biggest one was after I took a trip with my husband. He had business in India. With painting, I started off with just painting in browns because I was scared of color. Mm-hmm. And so I just painted monochromatic. And, so there's all these little steps in my journey where I finally say, okay, you got to use more than one color. And so I would start using, different colors. But India was my breakthrough to painting larger. I had a large canvas. It was the 4 foot by 5 foot canvas, which I got at a local store just because I'm like, okay, I'm going to do it. I'm going to someday paint big. And then I couldn't fit the canvas in the car. And so my husband and I had to hold it on top of the car as we drove home. And it was then after India, after looking at that canvas for months and months, sitting in my bedroom, because that was my studio at the time, that I was like, okay, I have a show coming up in like 5 weeks. I'm going to paint a big one. I'm just going to do it. And so I drew it all out and I just painted it. And it was so much more free. The movement that you can do, you're not confined to small spaces. You can really blend and work in your colors and in areas where it's not like tedious little paintings. It's more of, the broad movement of your whole arm and getting really into it.
Yeah. How do you feel like your work with more abstract paintings in college influences your florals now? Do you feel?
Definitely a different way of working, but I think the abstract allowed the enjoyment of line. A lot of my work dealt with lots of different lines, and they're always more organic lines and curving lines rather than the linear.
Well, give us a tour of your process a little bit. So from idea, inception to final big painting, what's the process look like for you?
The big thing that I do is I don't necessarily go out and seek images. It is all inspiration from what's around me every day. So I take photographs with my phone, but it is when I am on a walk with my husband in the neighborhood and we're on the trails and we see a beautiful poppy or, whatever it might be. It's when all of a sudden I'm drawn to anything, anything that is obviously botanical. Sometimes it's a trip to Lowe's or Home Depot when I have to, get things for the house. One of my really large succulent ones came from Lowe's, just a little succulent, it's a tiny one, but then blowing up on the 4x5 canvas is really kind of makes that impact section. And sometimes, a rose or, the lilies catch my eye there. And so it's really just the everyday kind of stop and enjoy your surroundings. Something that I didn't necessarily have time to do when I was a teacher. I forgot to stop and enjoy those little beautiful moments. And so that's kind of what I really focus on now is stop and enjoy your surroundings and what's around you. So I photograph and then I print it out. So I have my image and I do grid it. I used to not grid my drawings or my paintings. I never enjoyed the drawing process. And so I would kind of sketch it out without the grid, but then it wouldn't be as accurate as I would like it to be. So I grid out my photo and grid out my painting. After drawing it, then I just get ready to paint. And I know that there are some artists who, paint square by square or they paint one color at a time. And that's not necessarily how I do it. I get my palette ready of the colors that I am going to use. I mix up some of the base colors that you will see in the paintings. So like from the painting behind me here, I probably mixed up about 9 different kinds of pinks. I just went for it. So I grabbed my brushes. A typical painting session, I might use 20, 30 brushes and have about 18 plus in my hand at a time. I like how I can then blend with a dry one, but then I don't want to clean out the other ones because I still need it because I don't focus just on one color. It's kind of, I'm a mess when it comes to painting, but it is just more of a feeling. I might start painting up at the top and then think, ooh, I want to go over here. And then I'll put a dab of paint on the canvas, but then leave that and go somewhere else. And then 5 minutes later, come back and blend that dot back in.
I know you've mentioned before to me that sometimes people think a painting is done when you think you still have like 9 layers to go. So what's that like?
And that's the one thing I love about having a studio at Mainframe is people are able to come in during all steps of your, painting process and hearing their feedback. And so, yeah, this painting back here only has 1 layer on it. And so it's so far from done. But when people see it, they're like, "Oh, that's so beautiful." And I'm like, "Oh, thanks, but it's not done. How can it not be done? What else do you have to do?" And so it's interesting because the first layer, it's just getting kind of the colors in a spot. And the second layer, you're starting to refine the colors so that they're more the colors you want. And your depth of them, the depth, the whites and the darks are just continue to be pushed during those times. And so, yeah, it's just interesting. And I've struggled at times because I've had people who've come in, other artists or just people who stop in the studio and they're like, "Oh, it should be done. Don't touch it. It looks great." And I'm like, "Oh, but I'm not done yet." And so for a lot of people ask, how do you know you're not done if it doesn't bother you? So, when I look at a painting and I know I've only done 4 or 5 layers, if it doesn't bother me and it's still the way I want it, then it's done. But if there's 4 or 5 layers on it and I keep looking at it, I'm like, "Oh, there's this area over here and I need to work in here more." And so it's all about being pleased with what you do and being able to set it up and say, "Yeah, this is great. This is exactly what I want," instead of nitpicking all the little parts that you still need to work on.
Have you ever had a painting that you finished it, maybe sold it even, 100% said you're done, and then later, once you've worked more and grown more, you look back at it and you're like, "Man, I could add a couple more layers to that"?
Absolutely. So, especially in the beginning of my whole painting process, I have pieces that, I said I worked in, monochromatic browns or black and white. And I've had some then where I've decided afterwards, like, okay, I'm pushing myself to do colors. So this black and white magnolia is now going to be blues and greens. And so now I need to keep pushing it. I didn't get the depth in there. I need to keep working on it. So there are some of those that, that you just keep seeing what you can improve on. I just finished one actually yesterday that I had hanging in my studio for probably about 8-9 months. And I kept looking at it and I just say, "I know I'm going to have to go back on that one. I need to get back into that one." It's just keeps coming to my mind, but I have so many others I was working on. So that's been kind of nice is, bringing some of those home, and it's like, this is it. You're going to do it today, because it definitely is fun to go and work back into things. And
yeah. What do you think is the most inspiring part of creating for you? Like, what really drives you to paint?
The forms make me want to paint. The flowers, the movement. It's so fulfilling. It's like when I paint, it fulfills a part of me that nothing else can. The movement and the colors in florals and botanical, and just really, my favorite part is layer 1 is just attacking the canvas with paint and brush and just making these images appear, sitting down and getting that paint on there. And that's the part I love, is making it come alive.
How do you think that being creative and having this outlet has helped you throughout your life, maybe through difficult times, maybe through these times, which are so difficult for so many of us?
It's that you always have something to do. I am so thankful that I have something like painting and creating during this time. Had I not, I think I would be more stir crazy, like a lot of people are. Like I taught my daughter how to oil paint, and so she worked on a painting. We, did some wood burning. I taught her how to make and create stickers and iron-ons from like the vinyl cutting machine. I created stencils from photographs that I took in India so that I can use them in artwork, and I'm using modeling paste on wood, and then I'm going to do encaustic on top of it. So I think that my mind keeps moving, and if we didn't have this pandemic right now, I wouldn't have been doing any of those things besides just the painting. Because of this time of being home and wanting to involve my daughter and wanting to keep trying new things, it's given me that opportunity, and I think that's, part of me as well is the teaching. I'll never stop teaching. So whether it be my daughter, whether it be the neighborhood kids, whether it be myself, I'm teaching myself all these new processes during this time as well, hoping, others can see how creating in and of itself can also just be a way to cope during these times.
Final question. What would you say to someone who maybe wants to take this time to be creative, but finds the process of it somewhat intimidating? What words of encouragement would you have?
I would say kind of like my first painting professor, Fergie, just do it, just play. I think when people think it has to be perfect or beautiful or resemble something, that's when you put up walls and say, I can't do this, I don't know how to do it. It is more about taking what you have and creating something out of it. You can take what you have at home. I mean, scrap paper, junk mail, cutting it up and making collages. You don't have paints, you can create them with food coloring and water. You can paint with tea, you can paint with coffee. It's all about just trying something new, doing something different, and just play, I think, is really a big part of it. I know there are a lot of people who are out there for you to help you. I teach oil painting classes and adult acrylic classes and children's classes as well, but I've reached out to some of those and said, how's it going? Show me what you're making, and being able to, still be there for them and help them through these times as well. I think contacting me through like Instagram or Facebook and showing me what you have and let me know you're stuck. I can give you guidance on how to keep going. And, I think there's a lot of people out there that would definitely be willing to help those who want to be creative and are stuck and just need that encouragement or push.
Well, Jess, if anyone wants to see more of your work, engage with you, what's a good place to go to do that?
I have my website, which is jessquinnart.com, or I'm on Instagram at jess.quinn.art, and on Facebook as well as Jess Quinn Art. So you can reach me through any of those avenues.
Thank you so much for talking with me today, Jess. It was great to virtually see you. It's always wonderful to talk to you.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
I saw your video and I remember I love art and I hate my phone.